Imagine a river that has forgotten it is flowing. It looks at itself and thinks, I need to reach the sea, I need to reach my destination, because only then will I be complete. But the river does not realize that every bend, every eddy, every reflection of the sun on its surface is already the dance of the ocean itself. So it is with the human spirit. From the beginning, life was a living stream, pulsing within us. But at some point in history, something happened. Mystery became doctrine, silence became rule, and infinity contracted into creeds that said, only through this gate, only through this key, only through this institution will you find what was never really outside of you, Christianity. In its most institutional expression, drew up a map and called it territory. It took the living words, the parables that breathed like wind from the mouth of a wandering prophet, and turned them into rigid bricks of catechism. And yet spiritual truth cannot be imprisoned. The spirit is like the breath. You feel it, but you cannot hold it. They tried to bottle the wind and say, here is God, and only here. But anyone who has felt the breeze on their skin knows that it blows wherever it wants, and no one knows where it is going. The paradox is this. The religion that was born of a master, who spoke of the kingdom of heaven as something that was already within each person, ended up saying that this same kingdom was the private property of the church, locked behind invisible walls. And so it was that, little by little, spirituality became moralism, living experience became compulsory belief, and ecstasy became obedience. Institutional Christianity denied spirituality not by rejecting it directly, but by freezing it in dogma, by taming the untamable, by trying to put the whole sea inside a golden cup and call it truth. And yet the human heart still beats. Even in the quietest cathedrals, even under the weight of raised crosses, there is still an echo. It says, it is not about believing in something outside, but about awakening to what already vibrates within you. Because spirituality is not a theory about God, it is wonder at existence. It is not obeying commandments like someone following orders from a general, but realizing that every moment is a sacrament. Think about time. We were told that life was a waiting room, that the present world is just a rehearsal, and that true reality will come later, in heaven or hell. But notice the hidden trick. By pushing the sacred into the future, the sanctity of the present was stolen. The butterfly that flits by, a child's laughter, the wind in the trees, all of this has been declared secondary. And so we have become exiles from our own lives, beggars of an eternity that was already vibrating in the here and now. The denial of spirituality was not only theological, it was existential. It was the denial of the flesh, of the body, of desire, of dance. The body became suspect, pleasure became sin, and the earth ceased to be a garden and became a testing ground. But consider the irony. How can we love the Creator if we reject His creation? How can we praise mystery if we close our eyes to the poetry of simple things? The inner silence, which should have been a source, was filled with the voices of authorities, decrees, and dogmas. Direct trust in the heart was replaced by the mediation of a hierarchy. And so, many lost intimate contact with that which cannot be taught, but only lived. Yet, like water seeping through cracks in stone, spirituality never died. It escapes in moments when we laugh for no reason, when we cry in the face of beauty, when we are moved by music, when someone's presence disarms us. In these gaps, something vaster whispers, you don't need permission to be what you already are. True spirituality is not something we possess, but something that possesses us. It is not achieved through correct belief, but through surrender to mystery. Institutional Christianity, in its zeal, tried to imprison this vastness in creeds, but Christ himself said, "The wind blows where it will," and that is still true. The curious thing is that fear was used as a master of ceremonies. If you don't obey, they said, there is eternal fire, endless punishment. And so spirituality ceased to be a dance and became an anxious vigil, always with one eye on the shadow of a projected hell. It is as if life were a narrow corridor with thorns on either side, where the slightest deviation results in condemnation. But think with me, what true love can flourish amid terror? Love does not grow under coercion. It flourishes in the space of freedom. When you love because you fear, it is no longer love, it is servitude. And so many knelt, not before mystery, but before fear. The Christ who spoke of the lilies of the field, who said to look at the birds, who embraced the rejected, was replaced by a caricature of a stern judge armed with heavenly accounting books. What was spontaneity became moral calculation. What was presence became a distant promise. And what was inner freedom became imprisonment disguised as salvation. But the paradox remains. The denial of spirituality could never be complete, because even the fear that imprisons us is made of the same life that liberates us. Even illusion is an expression of reality. When someone trembles before punishment, they are, without realizing it, touching the same force that could dissolve that punishment into compassion. The issue has never been the absence of spirituality, but rather its neglect. Like a man who dreams he is locked up without realizing that the door has always been open. That is why, over the centuries, so many mystics within Christianity itself have become almost heretical in the eyes of the institution. They spoke of direct union with the divine, of experiences so intimate that they did not fit into manuals. And they were persecuted precisely because they dared to say, you don't have to go through the golden gate of the church to find what is already here. They were living reminders that the river never stopped flowing, even when we built dams. If you stop right now at this moment and simply listen, not to the words I say, but to the space between them, there is something pulsing. It is silent but alive. It is immense but close. This is what has always been here, before any religion, before any doctrine. This is what has been called spirit, or eternity, or God. But see how the name doesn't matter, for when you name it too much, you lose intimacy. Institutional Christianity denied spirituality by trying to imprison it, but paradoxically, it was also one of the greatest vehicles for spreading its possibility. For every time someone heard about heaven, even as a future promise, something inside them remembered the desire for the eternal. And this desire is not wrong, just misdirected, because it is not about waiting for heaven after death, but about opening your eyes to perceive the heaven that breathes at this very moment, in the form of wind, light, the simple miracle of being conscious. You see, the very idea that we need to be saved is already based on a mistake. Saved from what? From what we already are. The problem is not in reality, but in the illusion that weaves veils over it. The ego, so dear and so fragile, is the one that fears its own dissolution. That is why it clings to creeds, structures, promises. But when the ego falls apart, what remains is only life in its fullness, not as something we possess, but as that which has always possessed us. The denial of spirituality did not destroy spirituality. It only hid it behind layers of fear, rules, and authority. Like clouds that cover the sun without ever being able to extinguish it. Therefore, even in the darkness of the most severe doctrines, the light still shines through. And human beings, in their infinite curiosity, continue to seek, to question, to feel that perhaps there is more. And it is in this maybe that everything opens up. For all it takes is a crack, a moment of silence, a pause in the internal discourse, for the sacred to reveal itself not as an answer, but as a presence. What was denied by the institution could never be denied by life. With each breath, spirituality insinuates itself. With each heartbeat, it announces itself. And then the question arises, how could something so obvious be so overlooked? Perhaps because we were looking too far away. We searched the sky, when it was always in the simple act of feeling the earth beneath our feet. We waited for words from prophets when the truth whispered in the sound of the wind. We wanted guarantees of salvation when we were already inseparable from what we call divine. But you see, forgetting is also part of the game. For how could we awaken if there were no dreams? How could we feel the fullness of return if we had never felt exiled? It is like breathing. We need to exhale in order to inhale again. The very denial of spirituality was, in a sense, the sigh of forgetfulness necessary for humanity to be surprised by memory again at some point. And there is no memory more vivid than that which arises after emptiness. When a religion declares, this world is not enough, wait for the next one, it inadvertently plants a seed. That seed grows as restlessness, as thirst, as a premonition that perhaps the eternal is not ahead, but already here. And in each generation, a few dare to ask, what if it is now? That now is the crack that breaks the shell. It is the spark that reveals that paradise was never a place, but a state of presence. See how paradoxical life is. Institutional Christianity denied spirituality by projecting it beyond, but in doing so, it provoked in many the need to look beyond the walls of the church itself. Denial turned into invitation, prohibition became provocation, and so from the imposed silence, rebellious voices were born, and from the projected shadows, inner lights emerged. Time, for example, has been hijacked. They said, true time will begin after death. Eternity will only come in the future. But what is eternity if not the absence of time? And where is the absence of time if not in this very moment, where past and future dissolve? By waiting for something to come, we forget that we are already immersed in timelessness. It's like someone waiting for the moon without realizing that it is already shining above their head. The ego loves this story because the ego is always a project for tomorrow. It says, I'm not enough yet, but I will be if I obey, if I believe, if I sacrifice myself, and so the present is postponed indefinitely. But spirituality is not a project. It is the collapse of all projects. It is when you suddenly realize that there is nothing left to achieve because you are already inseparable from what you were seeking. This is the point where metaphors become dangerous, for any word spoken about the mystery is already a reduction, and yet we need to speak because pure silence seems distant to the mind that still clings to concepts. So we use parables, images, stories. We say that the spirit is like the wind, like the flame, like the sea. But all these images are just pointing fingers. The institution's mistake was to confuse the finger with the moon, the metaphor with reality. And so, over the centuries, many lived not spirituality, but its shadow. They performed rituals, repeated formulas, memorized dogmas, but did not touch the unspeakable. It was like dancing without music, like praying without silence, like loving without presence. But even so, even in the most empty practices, something survived. For even when the chalice is dry, the memory of water still shines on its walls. Perhaps that is why the figure of Christ himself remained so alive, even when surrounded by layers of dogma, because there was the memory of someone who spoke not of belief, but of trust, not of rules, but of surrender, not of tomorrow, but of today. The kingdom of God is within you. A phrase so simple that, if truly heard, it would dissolve centuries of theology. For how can one imprison that which is already within? How can one monopolize that which has always been available to all? The spirituality that was denied by religion did not disappear, it just disguised itself. It is in the interstices, in the moments when logic fails, in the seconds when the heart opens for no reason. It is in direct, raw, untamed experience. That is why so many felt more spirituality watching the sunset than during hours of sermons. That is why tears fall before music and not before decrees. Real life always wins, even when they try to cover it up with veils. And here is the final paradox. Even denial was an expression of spirituality itself, because everything, including error, is part of the dance. The church that tried to control the spirit was also the stage on which the spirit rebelled, on which seekers rose up, on which mystics dared to speak the unspeakable. It's all part of the cosmic game of forgetting and remembering, imprisonment and liberation. The mystery is that nothing was really lost. Spirituality was not destroyed, only covered up by words, dogmas, and fears. But life, with its infinite patience, always finds a way to break through the walls. Just as a plant sprouts from cracks in the concrete, the spirit flourishes even where everything seemed hardened. And perhaps it is precisely in this tension that it shows itself to be strongest. When it seems suffocated, that is when it breaks through and breathes. Institutional Christianity said, you need us to reach God. But life itself responds, you are already in God now, even if you don't believe it, even if you doubt it, even if you run away, because there is no way to leave the ocean when you are already made of water. That was the great irony. We spent centuries trying to return to what we never left. It's like a fish searching for the sea, swimming desperately, without realizing that every movement of its tail is already the sea in action. And the ego enjoys this. It likes the search, because the search gives it time, importance, purpose. The ego doesn't know what to do with simple presence. The now is too small for it, too humble. It needs epic narratives, heaven, hell, salvation, damnation. It needs the cosmic stage to feel relevant. But the spirit doesn't need that. The spirit is in a child's laughter, in the curve of a leaf, in the breeze that enters through the window without asking permission. It doesn't need to be grandiose, because it is already infinite in detail. See how fear was the most effective tool. The threat of hell became a leash to hold millions. But ask yourself, what is more frightening, eternal fire or the possibility that there is nothing to fear? Because if there is nothing to fear, if there is no punishment or reward, then we are free. And freedom is what frightens the ego the most. The freedom to have no excuses, to blame no one, to simply be who you are. The spirituality that has been denied is precisely this freedom. The freedom to feel, to love, to make mistakes, to laugh, to die. The freedom not to know. But institutions don't know how to deal with this, because freedom cannot be controlled. That is why they have so often tried to reduce life to manuals, as if infinity could fit into 10 commandments. But life escapes. It always escapes. Silence is perhaps the greatest scandal, because in it there are no intermediaries, no priests, no books. There is only the direct presence of being. And that is what, for the most part, has been denied: the right to listen to oneself, to trust in silence. Churches feared this emptiness, because in it there is no need for walls or rituals. But it is in this emptiness that everything flourishes. The void is fertile. It is a womb. It is a source. And what about the body? It was treated as an enemy, as a burden, as a prison for the soul. But the body is the altar itself. It is in it that life expresses itself. It is in it that mystery sings. By denying the body, incarnate spirituality was denied. The result was a religion that floated on ideas but forgot the smell of the earth, the touch of skin, the taste of fruit. A disembodied spirituality is like music without sound. It exists as a concept, but it does not vibrate. Still, something remains indestructible. With every heartbeat, the spirit insists on being here. No matter how many sermons stifle it, it continues to pulse, and from time to time someone awakens. Someone looks at life without filters, without dogmas, and realizes everything is already sacred. This recognition is too simple to be accepted by institutions, but it is precisely in simplicity that truth hides. Look around you now. Don't wait for future enlightenment. See the light that already dances on the surface of things. What else could spirituality be besides that? The breath that enters your lungs without you having to ask for it. The sky that changes color every moment. The silence that surrounds every word you hear now. This is what has always been denied, not because it didn't exist, but because it was too simple to be controlled. Institutional Christianity did not deny spirituality in the sense of destroying it. It denied it by complicating it, distorting it, turning it into a bargaining chip. But the real is never lost in distortion. The real is like a mirror. It may be covered with dust, but it never stops reflecting, and a breath is enough to make it shine again. There comes a point when we realize that the entire structure built to protect spirituality has ended up obscuring it. It is as if we had placed a lamp inside an iron box, believing that the metal would increase its brightness. But what happened was the opposite. The light was hidden, and darkness became confused with mystery. Even so, the flame never stopped burning. It burned silently, waiting for the moment when someone would dare to open the box and realize that the light had always been there. The gesture of denying spirituality was also a gesture of affirming it indirectly. Because the more people said, "Don't look inside," the more the suspicion grew that something precious was right there. The human spirit is stubborn. It is not satisfied with ready-made answers. Doubt, so often condemned, is actually a gateway. For it is doubt that compels us to look for ourselves, to seek not in the words of others, but in direct experience. And what do we discover? We discover that the present is not a stepping stone to a heavenly future, but the sacred ground itself. We discover that we do not need to wait for death to know eternity, because eternity is precisely what we are living in this second, where time cannot be measured. We discover that love is not a commandment, but the natural perfume of life, when it is not suffocated by fear. The irony is that Christ himself said this so clearly. He did not speak of stone temples, but of living hearts. He did not speak of blind obedience, but of trust in what already pulsates. He looked at the fields, the birds, the fishermen. He spoke the language of the earth, the water, the wind, but centuries later his voice was translated into distant Latin, surrounded by walls, adorned with golden crowns. What was simple became inaccessible. What was close became distant. And so, spirituality was confused with religion, but one is like the sky, open and boundless, the other like a window painted blue, trying to imitate that same sky. When we forget to look beyond the frame, we come to believe that the painting is all there is. The denial of spirituality was this error of perspective, exchanging vastness for the frame, life for the portrait of life. But mind you, this is not about condemning religion. It is also part of the dance. It was through religion that many first heard of something beyond routine, something that cannot be weighed or measured. Religion was the pointing finger. The problem was when we forgot that it was just a finger and began to worship it as if it were the moon. In this forgetfulness, spirituality seemed lost, but it never was. And here is the invitation. Suspend, even if only for a moment, all words, all doctrines, all memories. Feel what remains. If there were no catechism, if there were no church, if there were not even the idea of God, what would be present now? The same thing that has always been, the living silence that sustains every sound, the space that surrounds every form, the consciousness that witnesses everything. That is spirituality. It cannot be denied because it is the very fabric of experience. Institutional Christianity denied spirituality when it tried to condition it, tame it, subordinate it to authority. But spirituality does not obey. It is wild like the wind. You can build walls, but the wind always finds a way. It seeps through cracks, blows through ruins, carries seeds away. So it is with the Spirit. You can try to contain it in dogmas, but it always manifests itself where you least expect it, in laughter, in love, in pain, in death. And then we realize that even death, so often used as a threat, is just another face of mystery. They denied spirituality by painting death as an enemy, when it is only transition, dissolution, return. There is nothing to fear in what we have always been. Death steals nothing, it only returns. Fear of death is an invention of the ego which believes itself to be separate. But when we realize that there is no separation, death loses its poison. It becomes part of the greater breath, the exhalation that prepares the inhalation. What has been denied cannot be lost. It can be forgotten, distorted, hidden, but not destroyed. Because spirituality is not an object, it is the very basis of reality. And that is why, despite centuries of dogma, it continues to resurface. It resurfaces in the arts, in science, in philosophy, in poetry, in every human attempt to touch the untouchable. And if we look carefully, we will see that the denial of spirituality was not just a gesture of religion, but a tendency of human beings themselves when they forget themselves. For whenever we try to transform mystery into certainty, we fall into the same error. We exchange presence for security, experience for belief. And perhaps this is the true original sin, not a transgression committed at the beginning of time, but the recurring temptation to believe that we know, when the invitation of life is precisely not to know. Institutional Christianity built its strength on certainties, and the more absolute the certainty, the further it became from spirituality. For spirituality is not certainty, it is wonder. It is not possession, it is surrender. It is not a wall of doctrines, but an opening to the unknown. The ego clings to certainty because it fears emptiness, but the spirit flourishes in emptiness like a flower that blooms in the space between stones. What was denied then was not a set of alternative beliefs, but the very willingness to live in mystery. The willingness to listen to silence without correcting it, to feel the moment without wanting to hold on to it, to exist without the need to justify existence. The courage to simply be was denied, and so rules, intermediaries, and guarantees were created. But none of this replaces the simplicity of breathing consciously. See the paradox. They tried to reduce spirituality to something that could be taught, but the spirit cannot be taught, only awakened. You cannot give someone the experience of being conscious. You can only point, wait, trust. And that is exactly what the historical Christ seemed to do. Point, not impose. Show, not hold. The problem began when the living gesture of pointing was transformed into a statue, into dogma, into a repeated formula. And in worshipping the statue, we forgot to look where it was pointing. But the mystery is not offended by this. It continues, patient, smiling, lurking in every corner, because the real does not need our belief to exist. The sky does not depend on our eyes to be blue. Love does not need to be named to be felt. Spirituality does not require the approval of religion, because it predates any religion. It lies in the simple fact that you exist now, conscious. It lies in the fact that you can hear these words and perceive the silence between them. If there is a true denial, it is the one we commit within ourselves when we refuse to see. But even that does not erase what is real. It is like closing your eyes before the sun. You may not see the light, but the light keeps shining, warming, sustaining life. The Spirit is exactly like that, indestructible, independent, free. And then a silent revelation arises. We do not need to blame Christianity or any religion, because all of it was part of the play. It was one of the ways through which humanity learned to lose itself only to find itself again. It was a chapter in the history of the human dream, in which we wandered away from the heart only to discover that we had never left it. And what happens when we realize this? The weight falls. The need to accuse disappears. It is no longer about who denied, but about who awakens. And awakening does not happen in sacred books or in sermons, but right here, while you breathe, while you notice that the present moment demands no justification. It simply is. This is what was denied, simplicity. But simplicity is the hardest thing to erase, because it is the foundation of everything. It is like trying to erase space. You can fill it with things, but space never ceases to be there. It is invisible, yet essential. It is silent, yet indispensable. Such is spirituality. And silence, always silence, is the thread that weaves everything together. In silence, there are no dogmas, no hell or heaven, no condemnation or promise. There is only what is. Christianity denied silence by filling it with words. But silence remains, smiling behind the words. And when we tire of the noise, it is silence that welcomes us back. And so, little by little, the circle completes itself. What was denied reveals itself as never lost. What was forgotten returns as inevitable memory. And what was projected beyond shows itself always here. Perhaps that is why genuine spirituality always frightens institutions, because it cannot be controlled. A direct experience of silence, of presence, of unconditional love asks for no permission, needs no mediators, obeys no hierarchies. It is like wildfire spreading with no owner, and what cannot be controlled is dangerous to those who seek power. Institutional Christianity did not deny spirituality only out of fear of the mystery, but also out of fear of the freedom it brings. For those who perceive themselves as inseparable from the divine cannot be manipulated by threats or rewards. Those who awaken to the eternity of now do not kneel before promised futures, and those who feel the sacredness of the body and the earth do not bow before a distant heaven. But notice how everything balances itself. The attempt to deny was also the announcement that there was something to be denied, because no one tries to imprison what does not exist. The very existence of dogma is indirect proof of the freedom it tries to hide. The fear of silence is proof of the power of silence. The condemnation of the body is proof of its sacredness. The prohibition of looking inward is proof that something immense resides within. And so, one by one, seekers throughout the centuries began discovering openings. Some at the edges of the Christian tradition itself, others in encounters with Eastern philosophies, others simply in contemplating ordinary life, but all, in some way, reached the same point: the realization that spirituality has never been out of reach, never hidden in temples or imprisoned by doctrines. It has always been the breath, the laughter, the instant. When this is understood, the vision of life changes. Time ceases to be a race toward the beyond and becomes a dance in the now. Death ceases to be a threat and becomes a passage. Love ceases to be a duty and becomes a natural expression of being. Spirituality ceases to be a search and becomes recognition. It is as if, suddenly, the veil falls. And we realize that the promised heaven is not another place, but this vastness in which we are already immersed. Hell, so feared, is not eternal punishment, but the torment of always fleeing from the present. Paradise is not the future. It is the ability to see beauty even in what is simple, even in what is painful. And perhaps, deep down, that was the secret purpose of denial itself, to provoke in us such a profound thirst that, when at last we discover the water, we can no longer doubt its reality. Absence prepares us for the taste of presence. Forgetfulness prepares us for the intensity of remembrance. This is the cosmic game, to hide in order to be found. The divine plays at disguising itself as dogma, as fear, as moralism, only so that we may cross through these layers and laugh, in the end, realizing we were never separate. Christianity denied spirituality, yes, but only on the surface. Because behind every dogma, every cross, every sermon, the same silence always waited, intact, smiling, and here we are, in this very instant, feeling it again. No matter how many centuries have passed, how many wars were fought in the name of ideas, how many doctrines were raised, at the core, what remains is the same, the living mystery of existence. And this mystery does not fit in books, does not fit in creeds, does not even fit in words. It fits only in you now, in the open space of being conscious. What institutional Christianity denied you can recognize in a simple second of attention. And in recognizing it, there is no longer any need to accuse or defend. There is only the silent gratitude of perceiving that spirituality cannot be destroyed, because it is that of which everything is made. Life always laughs last, no matter how many systems are built, how many rules are invented, how many threats are proclaimed. Life escapes, it slips through fingers like water, it blows through walls like wind, it blooms through asphalt like a flower, and so it is with spirituality. Impossible to imprison, impossible to deny completely. The attempt to deny it only reinforces its inevitability. And see, the true scandal was never the death of a prophet, nor the corruption of an institution, but the fact that you already are what you seek. This is the secret, so simple it sounds absurd. That is why religions preferred to complicate. Because to say that you are already complete, already eternal, already participating in the divine, makes ladders, rituals, and mediators useless. It is dangerous for those who built power upon the promise of a tomorrow, but it is liberating for those who dare to listen. The spirituality that was denied is the one that does not fit in formulas. It is the one you find when you let go of hands full of beliefs and discover you never needed to hold anything. It is the spirituality that does not demand purity before living it, because it is already present in laughter, in doubt, even in confusion. It is the recognition that nothing can be outside the real, and therefore nothing can be outside the sacred. When institutional Christianity denied the body, it also denied the dance of life. When it denied desire, it denied creative energy. When it denied death, it denied the depth of the mystery. And yet all of this kept happening. The body kept breathing, desire kept moving, death kept revealing. No denial could stop the current. And so we arrive at a new vision. We do not need to destroy the past, nor erase religions, nor fight against dogmas. It is enough to see through them, to realize they are like old garments humanity once wore, but which now can be set aside. There is no resentment in leaving a garment, only gratitude for having served while it served. The spirituality not denied is this, a return to simplicity, a return to the now, a return to the silence that was never gone. And in this return we do not find definitive answers, but a strange peace, a light smile, a sense that there is nothing to solve, because the mystery is not a problem to be explained, but a music to be heard. And so, at the end of everything, there is no accusation, no defense, no victory or defeat. There is only the invitation. The same invitation that has always been present in every instant, in every breath, be here. Not because you need to achieve something, but because there is nowhere else to go. Not because you need to conquer the divine, but because you are already inseparable from it. Christianity denied spirituality by trying to lock it into formulas. But now, here, in this moment as you read these words, nothing can be denied. Silence is unavoidable. Presence is inescapable. The mystery is pulsing in every atom, in every thought, in every heartbeat. And so everything dissolves. Words exhaust themselves, concepts surrender. Only the open, infinite, untamable space remains. And within it, you realize there was never any real denial possible. There was only a game, a cosmic theater of forgetting and remembering. And now, remembering, you smile, because there is nothing else to say. Silence.